Alright, I'm back again with another Pokemon of the Week, a little bit later than I wanted, but I wasn't able to do this earlier than now. And nevertheless, here it is, and don't worry, I'll still fix another Pokemon of the Week for this week. So either way, this week's Pokemon is Mimikyu. And Mimikyu is, at the moment, probably the best support Pokemon you can find in 2v2 together with Arcanine. Both serve a very different purpose, but I'll get into that a little bit later. Let's start with Mimikyu's ability, because that's the main reason why it's so great, in my opinion. Or, better said, it is such a good addition to why it's already pretty good. And in case you don't know this is Mimikyu's only ability. I assume everyone already knows this ability, but nevertheless, if you don't, I'll explain it. What this does, Disguise, the first hit it takes is blocked, and it takes 1/8 of HP damage instead. Meaning that no matter how strong the move is, you only take 1/8 of HP damage, which really isn't that much, just 12.5%, which is really manageable, no matter how strong the move is. So that's incredibly useful, of course, but also it means you can guaranteed always live that one hit, and that one hit you live with, you live it pretty easily, of course, because 12.5%, what are we talking about, right? This only, of course, works for the first hit, pretty self-explanatory, but I thought I would mention it anyway. So this ability, of course, doesn't really grant you any attacking boost. It's not really an offensive ability. Like, it doesn't make your move stronger or whatever, but it's incredible, of course, as a defensive ability. It's probably the best defensive ability you can get, which already pairs so nicely with its typing, Ghost Fairy, meaning that you're only weak to Ghost or Steel. Both are not that common at the moment in this meta. So you have a really defensive typing, a really defensive ability, so that pairs really nicely. And then if you look at the move pool, the big two support moves you get are Trick Room and Will-O-Wisp. Let's start with Will-O-Wisp. Will-O-Wisp is, in this meta where a lot of the big threats, the big hitters are physical, then Will-O-Wisp is so useful. Because let's say you're facing Iron Hands, probably a Pokemon you see on 75% of every team. Will-O-Wisp just halves the efficiency of Iron Hands in half, right? It all of a sudden it has only half the damage output it normally would have, which is incredible, of course. That's such a big weakness physical attackers have to endure, that you can be Will-O-Wisp, and Mimikyu has access to that. So in combination with that completely being immune to fighting types, plus that Will-O-Wisp, that's super nice for Iron Hands. This is a super good Iron Hands counter, which, I mean, in this generation or in this meta, every Iron Hands counter is good. And then, of course, Trick Room. And Trick Room really pairs nicely with that Disguise ability, because Trick Room, for those who don't know, it's basically inverted Tailwind. So what does this do? For 5 turns, but in practice it's only 4 turns, right? Because you set it up, but you always set this up at the end of the turn, because this is, on the top of my head, -7 priority. You always go last, so that first turn of Trick Room is completely negated. So realistically, for 4 turns, the turn order is reversed, which is a somewhat bad explanation in my opinion, because turn order you might also think about priority moves being inversed, but that's not the case. What this does is that it makes the slowest Pokemon move first instead of the fastest, which it normally is. So my Torkoal would all of a sudden be faster than Fluttermane, right? Because of Trick Room being up. Oftentimes people recognize the Trick Room setters, and almost everyone already has like alarm bells in their head going off, thinking, oh no, that's the Trick Room setter. Trick Room teams oftentimes depend pretty strongly on their Trick Room setter, so everyone focused directly on the Trick Room setter, trying to take it out before it can set up that Trick Room. But in combination with that Disguise ability, it's super nice, because you won't get taken down in one hit. Like, one hit is negated, so they need to try to basically OHKO you. That's basically the only way they can stop you, besides from taunting you, but I'm just trying to think what runs taunt. Nothing really runs taunt in this generation at the moment. So Mimikyu makes really good use out of that. Then let's take a look at the stat. The stats so far, it's so disappointing, right? Because You have that disguise ability, you have that great moveset, and then you got these stats, which are just really mediocre at best, besides that SPDF. But I suppose you need to balance Mimikyu somehow, and with stats, that's a good way to do it. HP 55, that's abysmal. 55 HP, that's... Well, normally you're... For HP, what would you normally aim for? Like around 90? Maybe 80? Depending on how fast the Pokemon is. Sometimes 100, 110 if you're a bit lucky. But not this time, I suppose. Attack of 90. It's adequate. Normally you are aiming for around 100 or 110. That's always a good attack tier, I'd say. But 90, just below that. You can definitely work with it, but it is the big strong hitter as you maybe wanted. Defense of 80, that's pretty standard. That's just what you're gonna get, right? Most Pokemon have an average of 80 defense, so that's completely fine. Special attack, you're not using that anyways, so doesn't matter. SPDF of 105 is actually really nice. 105 is just pretty high. Normally, like, your SPDF is around 82, so you just basically get a markup of 25 base points in there, so can't complain about that. And again, when you run a Pokemon like Mimikyu, who will probably get targeted quite a bit because of that Trick Room and that Will-O-Wisp, it's really nice to have that extra bulk on hand. And then speed is kind of awkward here, right? Because 96 is actually a pretty good speed here. You would outspeed stuff like Tapu Lele. Not that it's relevant because Tapu Lele isn't here, but you know what I mean. It's decently fast. It's faster than most things, but at the same time you're a Trick Room setter. That's quite awkward, right? But it has some benefits, and I'd say you don't really have to worry about this because, well, most people are pumping already quite a lot of investment into their speed. So you underspeed them anyways, it really isn't a big deal. Besides, oftentimes when you make stuff minus speed, 0, everything in terms of speed, even Pokemon without being invested in, you're slower than them. So don't worry about that, you're still slow enough for everything you need to be. But the benefit of this is that you're still faster than something like Iron Hands. Iron Hands with no investment. Meaning you get Will-O-Wisp before Iron Hand moves, and then you can set up your Trick Room or, I don't know, kill something or try to kill something. So that's actually a pretty nice benefit, I'd say. Then, of course, in terms of the stat moves you get, Shadow Claw and Play Rough aren't really the best. Shadow Claw, 70 base power is just not it. It's just like the attack. It's barely not it. It's in terms of stat moves, you like around 80 or 90 is I mean, you'd never see 90, but 80 or 100 is probably what you want to find around that area. 70 is just kind of low. You of course have that high critical hit ratio, which I suppose kind of redeems it, but like preferably you would have had a little bit more damage. Play Rough is a pretty good stat move. It's just, for some reason, I know it says 90% accuracy. When I tested all the true odds of Pokemon, it also had something like 90% accuracy, but it really doesn't feel like it, so... but nevertheless, Play Rough is a pretty good stat move. I mean, 90 base power is nothing to complain about, and you even got a chance to lower the target's attack by 1. Not that that will really ever come into play, but it's nice to have, I suppose. But you, and this is something I'm gonna preface, you need to have that Life Orb. It's just so important, because otherwise you're not killing the stuff you want to kill. Normally you can Oko Great Tusk when it got -1 defense, which it will get more often than not with Play Rough, but without Life Orb you can't Oko it. Life Orb really enables you to Oko the stuff you need to Oko, which is pretty important, and as we saw already, that 90 attack, it's just 306 max is just so underwhelming, I suppose. So Life Orb will really boost that, which it really needs, actually. Like that 30% will go a long way. Life Orb really goes a long way on Mimikyu, so always run Life Orb. This is the set I would personally recommend you to run. Of course you can change all the EVs and IVs to gear to whatever you want to, but I think this is probably the most consistent way to achieve the best what you can achieve with Mimikyu. So let's go over to the big victims of Mimikyu, the stuff that loses to Mimikyu. Mimikyu is a counter to Iron Hands. And in the last Pokemon of the Week video I did, that was with Tinglu, I already showed you how non-threatening Iron Hands actually is when it gets burned by an Arcanine, for example. But Iron Hands, when being burned, or any physical attacker for that matter, really isn't that scary. Like, you really don't have to worry about it that much. So, like, and I mean this too, Iron Hands has Fake Out, which Mimikyu is immune to. It has CC as its main step, Mimikyu is immune to that. And Wild Charge, I mean, it isn't bad, but it also isn't the greatest, right? So Iron Hands really lose to Mimikyu, it has a tough time with it. Ting-Lu is in a somewhat similar position as Iron Hands. It's slower than Mimikyu, so it will get burned before it can move. And again, weak to play with, because both are weak to play with. Of course, Ting-Lu is a bit more scary with the weakness policy, but as soon as it gets burned, they won't win the 1v1 against your Mimikyu, so don't worry about that. Great Tusk is basically the exact same spot as Iron Hands, but maybe even worse because it has a little bit less bulk. The whole thing is when Great Tusk uses Headlong Rush, which is the move you will most likely use because you can't use CC, and Headlong Rush basically is a ground CC. You lower your defense by 1 and Mimikyu can actually OHKO you from there with Play Rough. I believe on the top of my head it's an 82.5% chance to OHKO, which isn't really ideal if you're trying to win versus the Mimikyu. So Mimikyu can actually OHKO the Great Tusk, it can also burn the Great Tusk. Great Tusk is really not in a favorable spot against Mimikyu. Fluttermane on paper could defeat Mimikyu, but the whole thing is, Mimikyu being Ghost type means that it's immune to stuff like Fake Out. Meaning that oftentimes, because Fake Out is the most common priority for those who don't know, Mimikyu doesn't get priority moved before Fluttermane goes. And Fluttermane being the fastest thing on the field oftentimes breaks the disguise of Mimikyu before it can actually damage it, right? Because let's say the disguise breaks and then Fluttermane moves, yeah, then Fluttermane will kill you. But on the other hand, Fluttermane oftentimes uses its move before its ally. So oftentimes Fluttermane ends up just breaking your disguise, which isn't a big problem because again, only 8 or 1/8 of your HP gets removed by that. So no problem at all. And then Fluttermane has a 55 base HP and a 55 defense, so this thing would probably die to a Fake Out if it wasn't Ghost type. So Mimikyu can easily OHKO this back with Shadow Claw, so Fluttermane also gets countered by Mimikyu. Azumarill, again, a physical attacker. As soon as this gets burned, it's kind of game over for you. Then you probably just get smashed by, I don't know, 2 Play Roughs and a little bit of chip, something like that. Iron Valiant again. This thing oftentimes runs a special attack set though, but well, in case it runs physical, you can burn it, and otherwise, oftentimes you can just kill it with Play Rough, definitely before it kills you. Because again, you can't use that fighting step. Oh, you can't use fighting step with Iron Valiant on the Mimikyu because again, you're immune to it. And as I said, there's so much good stuff out there, which is fighting type or relies on fighting types. So being Ghost type is so nice. Alright, so when we look at the counters, and this is the whole thing. These are kind of niche counters besides the Arcanine. The thing is with Mimikyu, as I said, you're only weak to Ghost or Steel. And the only thing that really threatens Mimikyu on the Ghost part of things is Fluttermane. But the whole thing is Fluttermane is so fast it oftentimes moves first, so your disguise kinda takes the damage and then you kill it back. And of course Ghost types are also weak to you, because you're also a Ghost type. So it's really hard to win versus Mimikyu with a Ghost type, and then Steel types, I'm just trying to think which Steel type really beats Mimikyu. There's not really a Steel type that's common or that a lot of people use that really is the Mimikyu beater, right? So the only real way oftentimes to deal with Mimikyu is to just strong arm it, right? To just break through it with a lot of power. That's oftentimes the only way to deal with Mimikyu, by just trying to get the power or trying to overpower it with just very strong moves. But again, that defensive typing, the ability, the pretty alright or pretty good defensive stats make it quite hard. But back to Arcanine. And again, I also showed this in the Ting-Lu this is so unprofessional. The Ting-Lu Pokemon of the Week I did last week. That Arcanine is the ultimate physical attacker killer. Because Intimidate, right? So you're already at -1. Then a Will-O-Wisp goes over that, so you're not even at half of your damage output, you're at even less. Then Morning Sun to, you know, outstall you. Iron Hands get just outstalled by an Arcanine. A max attack Quark Drive boosted Iron Hands gets easily outstalled by an Arcanine. There's not even a debate about it. Arcanine beats basically every physical attacker besides maybe Azumarill. But still, Azumarill doesn't like to face Arcanine too much. So if you ever face trouble against mostly physical teams, just run an Arcanine. You're fine, trust me. Tinkaton I thought is interesting to include because of how it works in terms of mechanics, but it isn't a true counter because who the fuck runs Tinkaton in 2v2? I don't know, but I rarely see it, and for good reason. The whole thing is that Tinkaton has access to Gigaton Hammer as its signature move, doing 160 base power steal. It's very strong. Normally Mimikyu wouldn't have a problem with that because of the disguise ability, taking only 1/8 HP damage. But the whole thing is, Tinkaton more often than not carries Mold Breaker, which ignores the opponent's ability. So this completely bypasses your disguise ability and just kills you. As I said, no way you find a Tinkaton, maybe on ladder or some other unholy 2v2 place, but you won't find any trouble with Tinkaton, don't worry about it. And Mimikyu, I suppose Mimikyu is to a certain degree a counter, because let's not forget Mimikyu is also a physical attacker, so the Will-O-Wisp also applies to Mimikyu, and the Shadow Claw also, because it's weak to that, applies to Mimikyu, but it's just whoever gets created first or who wins the most speed dice, right? That's basically what it comes down to. In terms of pairings, things that pair really nicely with Mimikyu, Iron Hands is probably the best partner for Mimikyu. Iron Hands being super strong, being super slow, and most importantly, having access to Fake Out. As I said, Mimikyu guaranteed leaves one hit, because of that disguise ability. So if you pair it with a Fake Out Pokemon, you can just Fake Out the other Pokemon, right? And then Mimikyu just takes 12.5% damage, Trick Room is up, then you can start sweeping. That Fake Out combines so well with the disguise ability. You completely shut down any chances of people killing the Mimikyu turn 1, which is oftentimes pretty required if you want to win that game. Otherwise you can also run Protect next to it, right? So when Mimikyu tries to set up Trick Room, you can Protect so you don't take damage, so you don't die. So let's say Mimikyu gets Trick Room up but its partner Pokemon gets killed. Yeah, you're still losing it, right? Because you need that other Pokemon to also deal the damage under Trick Room. Trick Room is very much a support move, and it won't win you a game without something that you're actually supporting, if you know what I mean. So let's say you find a Fluttermane on the field. Of course you can't Fake Out the Fluttermane and you don't want to risk your Iron Hands getting so much chip or just fucking dying. Then Protect is a fine option to go with. Tinglu, again, is a great Pokemon for any team, basically. The main thing is, again, Vessel of Ruin. A really good ability, especially for Mimikyu. We already told I already told you how important it is that Mimikyu can take quite some hits, that it's pretty defensive, right? That Mimikyu is actually also really good at it, but it's also very important that Mimikyu is good at it. Well, Vessel of Runes of course helps you with that special attack debuff for everyone, which of course doesn't affect your Tinglu, nor does it really affect your Mimikyu, because you're not special attacking, you're just going physical, right? Nothing special about it. So Vessel of Ruin makes you even bulky. You already have that 105 base PDEF. In combination with this, you won't be able to kill Mimikyu with just PDEF, special attackers, which is really incredible basically, because you completely shut down special attacking teams. Very useful, and of course it slows balls. 45 base speed, man, that's so slow. What do you get if you make this fully minus? I don't even know. You get 85, so you're pretty good on that one. Torkoal is probably one of the best, if not the most efficient, Trick Room sweeper. Torkoal's special attack looks pretty garbage. It's even worse than Mimikyu's attack. 85 is just super low. It's really mediocre. but it makes fully up for that with its incredibly slow speed, so you're always the slowest thing on the field. The only thing that's slower than you is Pkmn. You don't really have to worry about Pkmn. And then again, in combination with that drought ability, because you're so slow, you basically win any weather war. You always have sun up, because what does drought? When you switch in, you set up sunny day. And of course, you're the slowest thing, so you get the last activation of your ability. So you always get up sun, even if you face a Pelipper, a T-Tar, an Abominusno, or no reason why you should face an Abominusno, but it is what it is. Eruption, 150 spread move. That's just strong, especially in a doubles metagame. 150 spread move that gets boosted by the drought ability. That's basically a specs boost on top of that, of 150 base power move. That's so strong, and it's very hard for Pokemon to live an eruption from a Torkoal. Not a lot of Pokemon are able to take it. Of course, Iron Hands or Ting Lu is able to take it, but do you really think Fluttermane? Well, maybe Fluttermane, because Fluttermane is very spadef, but like, I don't know. An Iron Bundle. Iron Bundle will just completely die to it, just like a lot of other things in this meta. Of course, though, one thing to keep in mind with Eruption, it gets less power as the HP decreases. So less HP means less power, therefore always carry Protect next to it, because you want to be able to protect while Mimikyu is setting up the Trick Room, so you keep maximum HP, so you have a maximum damage output. Sylveon is basically the same as Torkoal, but just a fairy type and not as slow. It has a better special attack, but the worst move, but a pretty good ability too. So what does this do? It makes any normal type become a fairy type and gives it a 1.2 boost on top of that. And then of course you still get stab, making it incredibly strong. Hyper Voice being a normal type move, becoming a fairy type, getting a 1.2 boost on that, then you get the stab boost on top of it, and of course it hits both foes on the opposite field. So again, spread move, stab move, very strong. Again, it's not as strong as Eruption, but special attack is better. Right, so you win some, you lose some. Annihilate is kinda hard to explain, I'll be honest. This one you might just need to experiment for yourself. I don't know what it is, but it just works so well together. I think mainly because Annihilate already shuts down physical attackers pretty well with stuff like Bulk Up and Drain Punch and Rage Fist and that whole jazz going on. But in combination with the Will-O-Wisp, you can really start eating up those hits, keep boosting that Rage Fist damage. So I think this is mainly really nice against those physical attackers, but on paper it shouldn't work as well as it does in practice. So just try this one out for yourself, you'll probably love it. Garganagel, I'll be honest, this is just speculation. I have no clue if this is actually good, but it might be good, right? So hear me out here. Garganacl is basically the Registeel of this generation. You just give it lefties for that consistent recovery, just a little bit, but nevertheless, passive recovery, nothing wrong with that. Purifying Salt so you don't get toxic, burned, whatever. Iron defense to set up that +2 defense every time you use this, so you become unkillable. In combination with Salt, cure for the passive damage output on the other Pokemon, and then you can recover spam a little bit. You have unholy defense, like 130, that's just sickening, and then 100 HP, that's also not bad, like 404, that's very good. I think the great thing about this is, of course, Mimikyu can set up your Trick Room, because 35 speed, you won't be outspeeding anything, but it doesn't really matter if you're fast with Garganacl. The main thing that matters is that Mimikyu can Will-O-Wisp. So you are already quite strong against physical attackers with your 130 defense and your Iron defense, but then when those other Pokemon get burned too, you start snacking up those hits, and as we saw, Mimikyu is still faster, even at minus speed, than Iron Hands. And of course, Iron Hands being one of the main counters to Garganacl, you can just burn the Iron Hands. Your Garganacl takes a little bit, right? You Iron defense up, and then you start recovering after, and you will just not die. Of course, this won't work if you are facing special attackers, but if you face physical attackers, it would be very hard to win versus this. You need to like start triple critting stuff. And then for the future, this is a bit more speculation, but nevertheless, I think this is worth going over. And let's start with Walking Wake, the newest Pokemon. Walking Wake it isn't bad at the moment, but it's kind of mediocre, right? It's good, but the whole problem is that it's quadruple weak to Freeze Dry from an Iron Bundle. Iron Bundle maybe not being the most common Pokemon, but it's definitely not uncommon. And as soon as you face the Iron Bundle, your Walking Wake is dead because there's no terrestrializing into 2. Meaning you can't Terra type into Steel type. You just gotta stay Water Dragon and you'll die to Freeze Dry because there's no way you're getting faster than an Iron Bundle, right? There's just no way. But people are talking about an Iron Bundle ban. So let's say the Iron Bundle ban happens, all of a sudden Walking Wake doesn't really have a strong counter anymore. Besides Mimikyu. Mimikyu still would probably be able to counter this is what I'm assuming, of course. Because you can set up Trick Room, you have Play Rough, you have all the means to counter this, because Hydra's team, being of course strong, but I mean it can't use its Dragon Step, being Draco Meteor. So Walking Wake is just not gonna really be able to 1v1 the Mimikyu, because Mimikyu can just Play Rough this a couple of times. The defense is good, the HP is also good, but it's not good enough to 1v1 the Mimikyu, you know what I mean? And then you got Regidrago and everyone who played Gen 8. You know this guy, you love him, you hate him, I don't know. However you feel about this guy just never dies. Every time he comes back, he's just good again. So this will get paired with a Whimsicott, with a Talonflame, whatever has priority Tailwind, this shit will get paired with it. And this is basically Torkoal on steroids. You have a better special attack, you have an ability that also boosts it with 1.5, and this again is basically Dragon Eruption, which is incredibly good. Again, this is exactly the same as Eruption, but just Dragon type, so as your HP decreases, your damage output decreases. But nevertheless, this is... maybe it's because I'm traumatized with Gen 8, but Regidrago is so good, and it can sometimes be hard to counter. But of course, Mimikyu, being Fairy type, is immune to Dragon type moves. And the whole thing about Regidrago is that it completely relies on Dragon type moves, because that Ancient Power Rock type, 60 base power, you don't have to be afraid of the Ancient Power, don't worry about that. It's really the Dragon Energy that you got to be worried about, but again, Mimikyu, immune to it. So it's the best not the best counter, but it's definitely a top tier counter for Regidrago, because Regidrago has 0 chance to 1v1 the Mimikyu. It will never 1v1 the Mimikyu. It won't even be really able to finish off a Mimikyu that's already low. Because again, you are relying on Dragon Energy, and oftentimes they run stuff like Scarf or Specs. In this case, sometimes Life Orb, sometimes Dragon Fang, right? So it will be pretty easy to deal with it, and I think that's basically all there is to know about using Mimikyu in 2v2 and all the best ways to use it. And that's all I have for you. This was of course a Pokemon of the Week from last week, which I didn't get around to do on time. So for this week I'll do one more Pokemon of the Week. I don't know what I'm gonna do with Pokemon of the Week as a series after that. But for this week's, like not this one, but the one that is actually supposed to be on this week, it will be about Arcanine. So I hope you enjoy and have a nice day.